He handed her the divorce papers across the dinner table, sneering that she was nothing but a burden, a penniless freelancer dragging down his family's prestige. He laughed when she signed them without reading the terms, thinking she was too stupid to fight for alimony. What Brandon Hayes didn't know was that the cheap pen she used to sign her name was a limited edition Mont Blanc worth $40,000. He didn't know that the freelance work she did in her home office was actually managing a global hedge fund worth billions. And he certainly didn't know that the company his family was desperate to merge with to save them from bankruptcy was hers. This is the story of Emily Sterling, the woman who was divorced for pennies, only to be revealed as the empress of the business world. Grab your popcorn. You are not going to believe how this ends. The chandelier above the dining table at the Hayes estate was crystal, imported from Austria, and currently it was the only thing in the room sparkling. The atmosphere below it was suffocatingly dull, heavy with the scent of roasted duck and expensive, unearned arrogance. Emily Sterling sat at the far end of the table, her hands folded quietly in her lap. It was her 3rd wedding anniversary with Brandon Hayes, but there were no flowers, no cards, and certainly no warmth. Instead, she was surrounded by the people who had made the last 3 years a slow-motion car crash of emotional attrition. Brandon's mother, Patricia, and his sister, Caroline. "Emily, for heaven's sake, don't slouch," Patricia snapped, slicing into her duck with surgical precision. "It makes that dress look even more from the rack." Emily straightened her spine, her face a mask of practiced calm. The dress was a bespoke piece from a quiet atelier in Milan, made of vicuña wool, costing roughly $12,000. To Patricia, who only recognized logos like Gucci and Louis Vuitton plastered across chests, it looked like something from a discount bin. "Sorry, Patricia," Emily said softly. "And tell me," Caroline chimed in, swirling her Chardonnay, "did you finally land a client for your little graphic design hobby? Or are you still asking Brandon for grocery money?" Brandon, sitting at the head of the table, didn't defend his wife. He chuckled, a sound that grated against Emily's nerves like sandpaper. He was a handsome man, classic jawline, expensive haircut, but his eyes had grown cold over the last year. He was the vice president of Hayes & Co., a mid-sized logistics firm founded by his father. They did well, pulling in a few million a year, enough to maintain this mansion in Connecticut and a summer home in the Hamptons, but they were small fish pretending to be whales. "Actually," Brandon said, wiping his mouth with a linen napkin, "that's what we need to talk about, Evie." The room went silent. The air pressure seemed to drop. Emily looked up, her grey eyes unreadable. She knew this tone. She had seen the text messages from a woman named Jessica on his phone for months. She had seen the credit card charges for jewelry she never received. "We're done," Brandon said. He didn't say it with sadness. He said it with relief. He reached under the table and pulled out a thick manila envelope, sliding it across the polished mahogany surface. It stopped inches from her water glass. "Divorce papers," Brandon clarified, as if she couldn't read the bold letters. "My lawyer drafted them this morning. It's irreconcilable differences. Let's be honest, Evie. You don't fit in this world. You're simple. You're content with mediocrity. My family is destined for greatness, and I need a partner who can help me ascend, not an anchor dragging me down to the bottom." Patricia let out a sigh of dramatic relief. "Finally, Brandon. I've been saying it since the wedding day." Emily didn't reach for the papers immediately. She looked at her husband, the man she had agreed to marry because, 3 years ago, he had seemed kind. He had seemed different from the sharks she grew up with in the upper echelons of global finance. She had wanted a simple life, to be loved for herself, not for the sterling name, which carried the weight of a multi-billion-dollar empire. She had hidden her identity. She told him she was an orphan, a freelancer. She wanted to see if he would build a life with her from scratch. He had failed the test, spectacularly. "Is there someone else?" Emily asked, her voice steady. Brandon smirked. "Her name is Jessica Price. Her father is on the board of Technovus. She has connections, Evie. She has class. She's everything you're not. We're getting engaged as soon as the ink is dry on these." "Jessica Price," Emily repeated. She knew the name. The Price family was notorious in the city. New money, loud and leveraged to the hilt with debt. Jessica was a social climber who treated charity galas like hunting grounds. "The settlement is generous," Brandon continued, tapping the table. $50,000. You keep your car, that beat-up Honda, and your personal effects. In exchange, you waive all rights to Hayes & Co., assets and alimony. It's a clean break. Take it, or I'll have my lawyers bury you in litigation until you're homeless." Caroline laughed. 50,000. That's more than she's made in her entire life. "You're too kind, brother." Emily looked at the envelope. $50,000. It was less than what she spent on server maintenance for her private trading algorithm in a week. She reached into her purse, a plain black leather bag that was actually a vintage Hermes prototype, and pulled out a pen. It was heavy, black lacquer with platinum trim. "You want me to sign right now?" she asked. "Don't pretend you need to read it," Patricia sneered. "You wouldn't understand the legal jargon anyway. Just sign it and leave. We have guests coming at 8. Jessica is bringing champagne." Emily uncapped the pen. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She didn't beg. A strange, cold smile touched her lips, a smile that, for a split second, made Brandon feel a shiver of unease. It wasn't the smile of a defeated housewife. It was the smile of a predator watching a mouse walk into a trap. She flipped to the back page, signed her name in a fluid, confident scrawl, and closed the folder. "Done," Emily said, standing up. "Just like that." Brandon blinked, caught off guard. He had expected tears. He had expected begging. "Just like that," Emily said. She placed the pen back in her bag. "You're right, Brandon. I don't fit in this world. I never did. And you certainly don't fit in mine." She turned to Patricia. "The duck was dry, Patricia. It always is." Before the matriarch could sputter a response, Emily walked out of the dining room, her heels clicking against the marble floor with a rhythm that sounded suspiciously like a countdown. The heavy oak doors of the Hayes estate closed behind Emily, with a finality that felt like liberation. The Connecticut air was crisp, biting at her cheeks, but she didn't feel the cold. She felt the shedding of a skin. She walked down the long, winding driveway, past the fountain Brandon was so proud of, which was currently leaking, and toward the main gate. She didn't get into the beat-up Honda Brandon had graciously allowed her to keep. She left the keys on the gate post. Instead, she tapped a sequence into her phone. 2 minutes later, the darkness of the country road was pierced by the blinding LED headlights of 2 SUVs. They weren't Ubers. They were armored Cadillac Escalades, flanked by a sleek, midnight blue Maybach. The convoy pulled up silently. A man in a sharp suit stepped out of the Maybach's rear door. He was older, with silver hair and a face carved from granite. This was Harrison Cole, the most feared corporate attorney in New York City, a man who charged $2,500 an hour and was currently holding the door open for the woman wearing a discount wool dress. "Mrs. Sterling," Harrison said, bowing his head slightly. "Or is it Ms. Sterling again?" "Ms. Sterling," Emily corrected, sliding into the plush leather interior. "Definitely Ms. Sterling. Did you bring the file? It's on the tablet, Harrison said, settling in opposite her as the car pulled away, leaving the Hayes estate in the dust. I've also taken the liberty of cancelling your joint accounts. The $50,000 settlement has been wired to a charity for stray dogs in Brandon's name. I assumed you didn't want it. Smart man, Emily murmured. She reached for a glass of sparkling water from the car's console. How are things at Vanguard? Chaotic, Harrison admitted. The board is restless. They've been waiting for the phantom CEO to return. The merger with the Asian markets is stalling. They need you, Evie. The 3-year sabbatical is over. Emily looked out the window. For 3 years, she had run Vanguard Global, a holding company with assets in real estate, tech, and logistics totaling over $40 billion, remotely, using proxies and encrypted servers. She had played the role of the doting wife, cooking lasagna, and listening to Brandon complain about his stressful days managing a 20-person team. She had done it because her father, on his deathbed, had made her promise to find love that wasn't transactional. They will love you for the money, Evie, he had warned. Find someone who doesn't know who you are. She had found Brandon, and now she knew the truth. Without the money, some men simply didn't think you were worth loving at all. Take me to the penthouse, Emily said, her voice hardening. I need a shower, and call my stylist. I need to burn these clothes. The next morning, the sun rose over Manhattan, gleaming off the glass spire of the Sterling Tower. On the 90th floor, Emily stood before a floor-to-ceiling mirror. Gone was the messy bun. Her hair was now a sleek, sharp bob that framed her face like a helmet of war. The beige cardigans were gone, replaced by a tailored Armani power suit in charcoal grey, paired with stiletto heels that looked like they could puncture a lung. She picked up her phone. It was buzzing with notifications from the Hayes family group chat, which she hadn't left yet. Patricia. Can you believe she took the salt shakers? So petty. Emily had not taken the salt shakers. Brandon. Good riddance. Jessica is coming over for brunch. Make sure the house is spotless. Emily smiled, a terrifying expression. She typed a quick message to Harrison. Initiate Phase 1. Call the bank. Call in the loans for Hayes & Co. She walked out of the penthouse and into the private elevator. When the doors opened in the lobby of Vanguard Global, the bustling noise of the headquarters died instantly. 300 employees froze. Security guards straightened up. A receptionist dropped her phone. They recognized her. Not as Brandon's wife, but as the Emily Sterling, the daughter of the founder, the genius who had predicted the 2024 tech crash, the woman who owned the building. Welcome back, Ms. Sterling, the head of security boomed. Emily didn't stop walking. Morning, John. Conference room A in 10 minutes. I want the acquisition team ready. We're going shopping. Upstairs, in the boardroom, the executives were scrambling. Emily took her seat at the head of the table, a seat that had been empty for 3 years. Ladies and gentlemen, she began, projecting the financial reports of a company onto the massive screen behind her. The logo on the screen read Hayes & Co. This company, Emily said, pointing a laser at the screen, is currently leveraging its assets to expand into the Midwest. They are overextended. Their primary creditor is North South Bank, which we own, the CFO noted, adjusting his glasses. Exactly, Emily said. They have a balloon payment due in 30 days. $2 million. They don't have the cash. They're banking on a merger with a larger firm to pay it off. Who are they trying to merge with? Asked a junior analyst. Emily's eyes glinted. Us. Or rather, a subsidiary of ours. They sent a proposal last week to Vanguard Logistics. She tapped the table. Accept the meeting. Tell them the CEO of Vanguard Global is personally interested in their innovative approach. Set the meeting for this Friday." "You want to acquire them?" the CFO asked, confused. "Ms. Sterling, with respect, their financials are garbage. They're a nepotism-run, sinking ship." "Oh, I don't want to acquire them for profit," Emily said, leaning back. "I want to buy them so I can fire the vice president." "The vice president?" "Brandon Hayes," Emily said, savoring the name. "My ex-husband as of 12 hours ago." A ripple of shock went through the room, followed quickly by the realization of what was about to happen. "Arrange the meeting," Emily commanded, "and make sure they bring the whole family. Tell them we like to do business with family-oriented companies." 3 days later, the mood at the Hayes office was euphoric. Champagne corks were popping in the conference room at Hayes & Co. "I told you," Brandon shouted, raising a glass. "I told you I could do it. Vanguard Global. The Vanguard Global is interested in us." Patricia was there, of course, preening in a new Chanel suit she couldn't actually afford. "It's because you finally got rid of that dead weight, Brandon. Emily was bad luck. The moment she left, our fortunes turned." Jessica Price was hanging on Brandon's arm, looking bored but expensive. "Vanguard is huge, babe. My dad says if this deal goes through, your stock options will be worth 10 million. Easy." 10 million is just the start, Brandon bragged. "They want a meeting with the CEO. Do you know who that is?" "Nobody knows. They call him the Ghost. But obviously, he's heard of my work. He sees potential. We need to impress him," Brandon's father, Robert Hayes, said nervously. He was a sweating, anxious man who knew the company's books were cooked, but he was hoping this buyout would save him from prison. "We need to look united. Successful." "I'll wear my blue suit," Brandon said. "Jessica, you come too. You're the future Mrs. Hayes. It shows stability." "Should we bring the lawyer?" Robert asked. "No," Brandon scoffed. "We don't want to seem litigious. We go in, charm him, sign the deal, and get the check. By the weekend, we'll be on a yacht in the Mediterranean." Brandon pulled out his phone. He had a missed call from an unknown number, but he ignored it. Probably a bill collector. He didn't have to worry about those anymore. He was about to be rich. Real rich. Not just Connecticut rich. He looked at a photo on his desk, a picture of him and Emily from their honeymoon. He laughed and tossed it into the trash bin. "Goodbye, Evie," he muttered. "Enjoy your Honda." Little did he know, the woman who drove that Honda was currently sitting in a glass office 50 miles away, deciding whether to dismantle his company piece by piece or crush it all at once. The appointment was set for Friday at 2 p.m. Friday arrived with a slate-grey sky that threatened rain, but the mood inside the Hayes family limousine was sunny to the point of delusion. They had rented a stretch Lincoln for the occasion, a tacky move for a serious business meeting, but Brandon insisted on arriving in style. "Remember," Brandon coached, checking his reflection in the rearview mirror for the 10th time. "Let me do the talking. Dad, you just nod and agree. Mum, try not to be you." Patricia scoffed, adjusting a diamond brooch that was definitely paste. "I am the charm of this family, Brandon. If it weren't for my social graces, your father would still be driving a forklift." Robert Hayes sat in the corner, wiping sweat from his forehead with a handkerchief. He was the only one who truly understood the precarious position of Hayes & Co. They weren't just broke, they were illegally broke. He had moved funds from the employee pension plan to cover the operating costs last month. If this deal with Vanguard didn't go through, he wasn't looking at bankruptcy, he was looking at federal prison. The limo pulled up to the curb of the Sterling Tower in downtown Manhattan. It was a monolith of steel and glass that pierced the clouds, a building so imposing It seemed to look down on the rest of the city with disdain. "Wow," Jessica breathed, looking up through the sunroof. "Do you know how much rent is in this building? My dad said a broom closet here costs more than a house in Jersey. And soon," Brandon said, squeezing her knee, "we'll be partners with the people who own it." They exited the car, strutting toward the revolving doors. Brandon threw the keys to the valet with a casual, "Keep it close, we won't be long." The lobby was a cathedral of capitalism. The ceilings were 40 feet high, and the walls were lined with abstract art that cost more than the Hayes family's lifetime earnings. Security was tight, men in earpieces who looked like they were recruited from special ops. Brandon approached the front desk, flashing his most winning, practiced smile at the receptionist, a young woman with sharp glasses. "Brandon Hayes," he announced. "And party. We're here to see the CEO. We have a 2:00. The receptionist didn't smile back. She typed something into her computer, her face illuminated by the cool blue light of the screen. "Mr. Hayes, you are expected," she said, her voice devoid of warmth. "Elevator bank C. Top floor. You've been cleared for the executive suite." "Top floor," Brandon whispered to Jessica as they walked past the turnstiles. "That's where the gods live." The elevator ride was smooth and silent, climbing 90 stories in under a minute. As the numbers ticked up, Brandon's confidence began to waver, just slightly. The sheer scale of wealth here was intimidating. It wasn't the flashy, loud wealth he was used to. It was quiet, heavy, old money power. The doors slid open to reveal a lobby that looked more like a modern art museum than an office. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of New York City. In the center of the room sat a single, massive desk made of black marble. Standing by the window was Harrison Cole. "Welcome," Harrison said, turning around. He wore a navy suit that fit him like armor. Brandon frowned. He recognized the man, but couldn't place him. Do I know you?" "I don't believe we've been formally introduced in a business capacity," Harrison said smoothly. "I am the General Counsel for Vanguard Global. Please, follow me to the boardroom. The CEO will join us shortly." He led them down a long corridor lined with glass offices. Inside, analysts were shouting into phones, watching tickers that moved so fast they were a blur. This was the nerve center of the global economy. They entered the main boardroom. It was expansive, dominated by a table long enough to land a plane on. There were bottles of water set out, Voss naturally, and leather-bound notepads at every seat. "Please, sit," Harrison gestured to one side of the table. Brandon sat in the center, flanked by his father and Jessica. Patricia took the seat next to Jessica, immediately reaching for a water bottle. "So," Brandon started, trying to establish dominance. "We're excited about the synergy here. Hayes & Kosa brings a lot of local flavor to Vanguard's portfolio." Harrison didn't sit. He stood at the head of the table, his hands clasped behind his back. "We have reviewed your financials, Mr. Hayes. Flavor is certainly one word for it." Robert Hayes paled. "We're growing aggressively," Brandon interjected quickly. "That requires capital burn. But the projection models—" "We aren't here to discuss projection models, Brandon," a voice came from the intercom on the table. It was Harrison's voice, but he hadn't spoken. "No, wait," Harrison smiled. "I'm sorry, I should have clarified," Harrison said. "I'm not conducting the negotiation. I'm just here to witness it." The double doors at the far end of the room, heavy, sound-proofed mahogany, clicked open. "Who's conducting it then?" Patricia asked impatiently. "We were promised the CEO." "And you shall have her," Harrison said. The doors swung wide. The click-clack of heels on the hardwood floor echoed like gunshots. A woman walked in. She was wearing a white silk blouse, high-waisted trousers, and a blazer draped over her shoulders like a cape. She held a tablet in one hand and a cup of coffee in the other. Brandon's jaw dropped. Jessica gasped. Patricia dropped her water bottle. It rolled across the table with a hollow thud. It was Emily. But it wasn't the Emily they knew. The Emily they knew wore oversized sweaters and apologized for taking up space. This woman walked with the stride of a predator. Her chin was high, her eyes were cold steel, and she radiated a terrifying amount of power. She didn't look at them. She walked straight to the head of the table, the seat opposite Brandon, and set her coffee down. "Sorry I'm late," Emily said, her voice cool and crisp. "I was on a call with the Prime Minister of Japan. He talks too much." She looked up, locking eyes with Brandon. "Hello, Brandon. Close your mouth. You look like a fish." The silence in the room was so absolute it felt physical, like the air had been sucked out of the ventilation system. Brandon blinked, his brain misfiring. "Emily, what are you doing here?" He looked around the room, expecting a camera crew, a prank, anything. Then his face twisted into a sneer of confusion. "Did you get a job here? Is that it? You're the secretary taking notes?" Patricia let out a high-pitched, nervous laugh. "Oh, thank God." For a second I thought, well, never mind. "Emily, dear, we're in a very important meeting. Get us some coffee, would you? And bring some sugar this time." Emily didn't move. She didn't even blink. She just stared at Patricia with a look of profound boredom. Harrison Cole stepped forward, his voice cutting through the Hayes family's delusion like a knife. "Mr. Hayes, Mrs. Hayes, I believe there is a misunderstanding. This is Emily Sterling. She is the founder, majority shareholder, and CEO of Vanguard Global. She is the person you are here to impress." The words hung in the air. Sterling. Brandon froze. "Sterling? No, her name is Emily Summers. She's a nobody. She's an orphan from Ohio." "My mother was from Ohio," Emily corrected calmly, tapping her tablet screen. "My father was Archibald Sterling, the founder of the Sterling Exchange. I used my mother's maiden name because I wanted to see if a man could fall in love with me, not my inheritance." She leaned forward, her eyes narrowing. "I got my answer 3 days ago at the dinner table, didn't I?" Jessica Price pulled her hand away from Brandon's arm, as if he were radioactive. You're the Sterling heiress? The one Forbes called the silent billionaire?" "That's me," Emily said. "And you must be Jessica. I see you're wearing the bracelet Brandon bought with the company credit card last month. Item number 44402 on the expense report. Office supplies, I believe he labeled it." Jessica's face turned bright red. She covered the jewelry on her wrist. Robert Hayes was shaking. He looked like he was having a cardiac event. Ms. Sterling, Emily, we didn't know." "Ignorance is not a defense in court, Robert," Emily said, her voice dropping an octave. "And it certainly isn't a defense in this boardroom." She pressed a button on the table, and the massive screen behind her flickered to life. It displayed a complex web of bank accounts, transfers, and shell companies. "Let's talk business," Emily said, her tone shifting from personal to strictly professional, a shark smelling blood. "You came here hoping Vanguard would acquire Hayes & Co. for, what was your asking price? 20 million. "It's a fair valuation," Brandon stammered, trying to regain some footing, though his voice cracked. "We have assets. You have debt," Emily interrupted. "Show slide 2. The screen changed. It showed a red line plunging downward. "You are $4 million in debt to North-South Bank. You have liquidated your employee pension fund, which is a federal crime, by the way, to pay for your lifestyle, and your primary logistics contract with Amazon was cancelled 3 weeks ago due to incompetence. Emily stood up and walked slowly around the table, trailing her hand along the backs of the chairs. I don't want to buy your company, Brandon. Your company is worthless. She stopped behind Brandon's chair. He was trembling. However, Emily continued, I do own your debt. Vanguard acquired North-South Bank's distressed asset portfolio this morning, which means I own you. Brandon spun around in his chair. You can't do this. We were married. You owe me. I owed you loyalty, Emily said softly. And I gave it to you. You gave me divorce papers and a $50,000 check. She reached into her blazer pocket and pulled out the check he had given her. She ripped it into 4 pieces and let the confetti rain down on his head. Here is the deal, Emily announced, walking back to her seat. Vanguard will not be acquiring Hayes & Co. Instead, we are calling in the loan, immediately. We can't pay that, Robert screamed. It will bankrupt us. We'll lose the house, the cars, everything. Yes, Emily said simply. That is generally what happens when you spend money you don't have. Emily, please. Patricia stood up, tears streaming down her face. Real tears this time. We're family. I was like a mother to you. Emily laughed. It was a dark, dry sound. Patricia, you told me I should be grateful you let me eat at the table. You told me my dress was cheap. That dress was a bespoke Loro Piana. It cost more than your car. Emily turned to Harrison. Execute the foreclosure. Seize the assets. The Connecticut estate, the Hamptons house, and the office building. I want them vacated by Monday. Done, Harrison said, typing on his phone. Brandon stood up, his face purple with rage. You tricked me. You lied to me for 3 years. This is fraud. It's not fraud, Brandon, Emily said coolly. It's privacy. And frankly, if you had spent 10 minutes asking me about my day instead of talking about yourself, you might have figured it out. You didn't divorce me because I was poor. You divorced me because you thought you could do better. She looked at Jessica. And speaking of doing better, Emily raised an eyebrow. Jessica stood up. She grabbed her purse. I'm leaving, Jessica said, looking at Brandon with disgust. I can't believe you dragged me into this. You're broke. You're actually broke. Jessica, wait, Brandon pleaded. We can fight this. Fight what? Jessica snapped. She's Emily Sterling. She could buy my father's company with pocket change. You're finished, Brandon. Don't call me. Jessica stormed out of the room, the sound of her heels fading down the hallway. The Hayes family was left alone in the wreckage. Robert was weeping into his hands. Patricia was staring blankly at the wall. Brandon looked at Emily one last time. He looked small, defeated. Why? He whispered. If you had all this, why didn't you tell me? We could have ruled the world together. Emily looked at him with a mixture of pity and indifference. Because, Brandon, she said, signaling security to escort them out. I didn't want a ruler. I wanted a husband, and you wanted a stepping stone. She turned her chair around, facing the window and the sprawling city below. Get them out of my building, Harrison, and make sure they validate their parking. I'm not paying for it. The fall of the Hayes dynasty did not happen in silence. It happened with the screeching of tires and the flashing of police lights. Monday morning arrived with a vengeance. The Hayes estate in Connecticut, once the symbol of their perceived superiority, was surrounded. But it wasn't guests for a dinner party. It was a fleet of moving trucks contracted by the bank, flanked by 2 squad cars from the local precinct. Patricia stood on the front porch, still wearing her silk robe, screaming at a deputy sheriff. You cannot do this. Do you know who we are? My son is a vice president. We are the Hayes family. The deputy, a tired man who had been stiffed on a tip by Patricia at a local diner 3 years ago, didn't blink. Mom, You are trespassing on bank-owned property. The foreclosure was executed at 9 a.m. You have 20 minutes to collect personal essentials. Furniture, electronics, and artwork stay. They are assets of the bankruptcy estate. Inside the house, Brandon was frantically shoving clothes into a suitcase. His phone was ringing off the hook, but not with job offers. The New York Chronicle had run the story. Headline, "From Freelancer to Tycoon, How the Silent Billionaire Divorced a Fraud." The article was brutal. It detailed everything. The divorce settlement of $50,000, the infidelity with Jessica Price, and the revelation that Hayes & Co. had been looting their employee pension fund to pay for luxury cars. Brandon's phone pinged with a notification. It was LinkedIn. His account had been flagged for suspicious activity. Then came the email from the country club. Membership revoked due to non-payment and conduct unbecoming. "Brandon!" Robert burst into the room, his face grey. "The police are here, not just for the eviction. They have a warrant." "What?" Brandon dropped a stack of cashmere sweaters. "For who?" "For me," Robert whispered, terrified. "The pension fund. The SEC started an investigation on Friday afternoon. Someone tipped them off." Brandon felt the blood drain from his face. Emily. She hadn't just called the loan. She had handed the evidence of their fraud to the authorities. She didn't just want them broke. She wanted justice for the employees they had stolen from. Downstairs, the chaos reached a fever pitch. Robert Hayes was led out in handcuffs, shielding his face from the local news cameras that had gathered at the gate. Patricia was sobbing, clutching a jewelry box that a foreclosure agent gently but firmly took from her hands. "That's Cartier," she shrieked. "That's seized property," the agent corrected. Brandon walked out of the house, carrying a single duffel bag. He looked at the driveway. His Porsche was gone, repossessed during the night. The only vehicle left was the company van, which was currently being booted by a parking enforcement officer. He looked at the crowd of neighbors watching from behind the wrought-iron fence. He saw the whispers, the phones recording him. The humiliation was total. He had spent his whole life pretending to be better than everyone else, and now he was lower than the dirt on their shoes. He pulled his hood up and tried to slip through the crowd, but a reporter from Channel 4 shoved a microphone in his face. "Mr. Hayes! Mr. Hayes! Is it true you divorced Emily Sterling because you thought she was poor? Do you have any comment on the rumors that you begged for her back?" Brandon shoved the microphone away. "No comment! Get out of my face!" He pushed past them, walking down the road because he didn't have a car, didn't have a ride, and realized with a sinking horror that he didn't have enough cash in his wallet for an Uber to the city. His credit cards had been declined at the gas station an hour ago. He sat on a bench a mile away from his former life, staring at his phone. He dialed Jessica Price one last time. It went straight to voicemail. Then a text message appeared. "Jessica, my lawyer says I can sue you for emotional distress and fraud regarding the engagement ring. Don't contact me again, or I'll add a restraining order to your problems." Brandon put his head in his hands. He laughed, a broken, hysterical sound. $50,000. That was what he had given Emily. If he had just been a decent human being, if he had just loved her, he would be waking up in the penthouse of the Sterling Tower right now. He would be royalty. Instead, he was homeless. 6 months had passed since the collapse of the Hayes dynasty. In the high-speed world of New York finance, 6 months was an eternity, enough time for fortunes to be made, companies to dissolve, and scandals to be buried under the next wave of gossip. For Emily Sterling, however, the last half-year had been a renaissance. The Sterling Tower, once a fortress of solitude where she hid from the world, had become a beacon. Under her direct leadership, Vanguard Global had not only stabilized but expanded aggressively. She had launched a clean energy initiative in Scandinavia, acquired a struggling tech giant in Silicon Valley, and established the Archibald Sterling Scholarship Fund, a massive philanthropic endeavor dedicated to financial literacy for women. But the biggest change wasn't in the stock price. It was in Emily herself. She sat in her office on a Tuesday afternoon, reviewing the guest list for the upcoming Sterling Foundation Gala. The sun streamed through the glass, illuminating the space where she had once sat in the dark, afraid to be seen. She wore a cream-colored suit, tailored to perfection, her hair cut in a sharp, asymmetrical bob that screamed authority. "Harrison," she said, not looking up from her tablet. "Why is the mayor on the wait list?" Harrison Cole, sitting on the plush leather sofa, reviewing contracts, chuckled. "Because he didn't RSVP in time, Ms. Sterling. And you made it clear. No exceptions." Emily smiled, a genuine warmth that had been missing from her life for 3 years. "Good. Let him sweat. It's good for his humility. Move him to table 4, near the kitchen doors, just in case he gets hungry." Harrison laughed. "You've become ruthless, Evie." "I was always ruthless, Harrison," she corrected gently, swiping to the next page. "I just spent 3 years trying to be small so someone else could feel big. I won't make that mistake again." The intercom buzzed. "Ms. Sterling, security update." "Go ahead," Emily said. "We have a situation in the lobby. A man claiming to have a personal connection to you. He's persistent. He's been here 3 times this week." Emily's finger hovered over the tablet. She knew who it was. She didn't need to ask. "Description?" she asked, just to be sure. "Male, mid-30s, disheveled, wearing a suit that looks lived in. He says his name is Brandon. He says he has an appointment." Harrison looked up, his face hardening. "I'll handle it. I'll have him removed for harassment." "No," Emily said. She stood up and walked to the window, looking down 90 stories to the ant-sized people below. Somewhere down there, in the chaos of the city, was the man who had once held her hand across a dinner table and told her she wasn't enough. "Let him go," Emily said softly. "If he's not threatening anyone, just tell him the CEO is unavailable. Indefinitely." "Evie," Harrison said, his voice dropping to a protective growl. "He's desperate. Desperate men are dangerous." "He's not dangerous, Harrison," Emily replied, turning back with eyes that held no fear, only a distant pity. "He's just empty. And emptiness can't hurt me anymore." 5 miles away, in a cramped, drafty studio apartment in Queens, Brandon Hayes stared at his reflection in a cracked bathroom mirror. The man staring back was a stranger. His eyes were sunken, rimmed with dark circles. His skin was pale, pasty from a diet of instant noodles and cheap coffee. The expensive haircut was long gone, replaced by an uneven trim he'd done himself with nail scissors. He adjusted his tie. It was a Hermes tie, one of the few things he had managed to smuggle out of the house in his pockets before the marshals locked the doors. It was stained now, a coffee spot near the bottom that he couldn't scrub out. "You can do this," he whispered to the mirror. His voice sounded thin, shaky. "You're a Hayes. You have experience. You're a vice president." He wasn't a vice president. He wasn't even employed. Since the scandal broke, Brandon had become a pariah. The article in the Chronicle had done its job too well. No reputable firm would touch him. He had applied for positions in logistics, sales, even data entry. Every interview ended the same way. A Google search, a polite cough, and a "we'll keep your resume on file." His father, Robert, was currently awaiting trial under house arrest in a rented basement in New Jersey. His mother, Patricia, had moved in with a distant cousin in Ohio, who she used to mock for being provincial. And Brandon? Brandon was here, alone. He checked his watch. It was a cheap plastic digital watch he'd bought at a drugstore. 4:30 p.m. He had an interview at a catering company. It wasn't management. It wasn't even sales. It was for a server position. Just for now, he told himself, grabbing his coat. Just until the heat dies down. Then I'll climb back up. I'll show her. I'll show them all. He walked out into the hallway, which smelled of boiled cabbage and damp carpet. He locked the door. Not that there was anything inside worth stealing, and headed for the subway. As he rode the 7 train into Manhattan, squeezed between a construction worker and a student, Brandon closed his eyes and remembered the leather seats of his Porsche. He remembered the smell of the ocean at the Hamptons' house. He remembered Emily's cooking. He realized, with a jolt of nausea, that he couldn't actually remember what Emily's cooking tasted like. He had never really paid attention. He had just eaten it, complained about the salt, and gone to watch TV. You don't fit in this world, Evie. The words haunted him. He had said them to her face. He had believed them. Now, looking around the grimy subway car, he realized the cruel irony. She didn't fit in his world because she was above it, and he didn't fit in hers because he had never bothered to look up. The night of the Sterling Foundation Gala arrived with the kind of electric anticipation that only New York could generate. The Plaza Hotel was transformed. The red carpet stretched down Fifth Avenue, flanked by velvet ropes and paparazzi screaming the names of celebrities. Inside, the grand ballroom was a dreamscape of gold and sapphire. Crystal chandeliers the size of small cars hung from the ceiling, casting a warm glow over the hundreds of guests. The air smelled of expensive perfume, orchids, and money. Emily stood in the VIP receiving line, shaking hands with senators and CEOs. She wore a gown of midnight blue velvet that seemed to absorb the light, shimmering with every movement. Around her neck hung a simple diamond pendant, the only piece of jewelry she wore. "Emily!" She turned to see Jessica Price approaching. Jessica looked different, less frantic. She was wearing a modest black dress, and she wasn't clinging to anyone's arm. "Jessica," Emily said, her tone polite but guarded. "I didn't expect to see you here." "I bought a ticket," Jessica said, clutching her clutch bag nervously. "Well, my dad bought a table, but I wanted to come." She hesitated, looking at the floor. "I saw the news about the scholarship fund, the financial literacy program. I signed up for the first seminar." Emily raised an eyebrow. "Did you?" "Yeah," Jessica admitted, a blush creeping up her neck. After everything with Brandon, I realized something. I didn't know anything about my own money. I was just looking for a guy to manage it for me. I don't want to be that girl anymore. I don't want to be useless." Emily studied her for a moment. She saw the genuine shame in Jessica's eyes, but also a spark of determination. "Good," Emily said, offering a small, tight smile. "The first step to not being a victim is knowing your own worth. Enjoy the seminar, Jessica. It's rigorous." "Thank you," Jessica breathed, looking relieved. "And Emily, you look happy." "I am," Emily said. As Jessica walked away, Harrison appeared at Emily's elbow. He looked tense. "We have a problem at the service entrance," Harrison murmured, leaning in close so the nearby senator wouldn't hear. "The catering staff?" Emily asked. "One of them," Harrison said. "The agency sent over a replacement server at the last minute because someone called in sick. Security flagged him, but he's already inside the prep area. It's him, Evie." Emily went still. "Brandon is here, working." "He's carrying a tray of champagne flutes," Harrison said, his voice laced with disgust. "Do you want me to have him removed?" I can have security drag him out the back before he steps foot on the floor. Emily looked out at the ballroom. She saw the laughter, the joy, the celebration of her hard work. She thought about the man in the prep area, wearing a borrowed uniform, holding a tray of drinks for people he used to think were his peers. If she kicked him out, he would be a victim in his own mind. He would tell himself she was cruel, that she was vindictive. "No," Emily said slowly. "Let him work." "Evie, are you sure?" "Let him work," she repeated, her voice hardening into steel. "Let him see. Let him see exactly what he threw away. Let him serve the world he thought he was too good for." She turned to Harrison. "But Harrison, make sure he serves table 1. Table 1 was Emily's table. Half an hour later, the guests were seated for the keynote speech. The room dimmed, and a spotlight hit the stage. Emily walked up to the podium, the applause washing over her like a tide. In the shadows of the room's periphery, Brandon Hayes stood frozen. He was holding a silver tray laden with crystal glasses. His uniform was ill-fitting, the collar too tight, the pants too short. He had been hoping to blend in, to make a quick $100 for the night and disappear. He hadn't looked at the guest list. He hadn't known whose gala this was. Then he heard the voice. "Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests." He looked up, and he stopped breathing. There she was. The woman he had criticized for slouching. The woman he had scolded for buying off-brand pasta. She was glowing. She commanded the room not with volume, but with presence. Every person in the room, billionaires, leaders, icons, was hanging on her every word. "Tonight is about value," Emily was saying. "Not the value of a stock, or a bond, or a property, but the value of a human being. Too often, we judge people by the label on their clothes rather than the content of their character. We mistake price for worth." Brandon felt a physical pain in his chest, a sharp, twisting ache of regret so profound it nearly brought him to his knees. He remembered the anniversary dinner. He remembered the look in her eyes when he handed her the envelope. "You're content with mediocrity," he had said. Mediocrity. He looked at her now, a titan of industry, a queen in her own court, and he looked down at his own hands, holding a tray for people who wouldn't even make eye contact with him. "Champagne?" A guest at a nearby table snapped, snapping his fingers at Brandon. Brandon flinched. Yes, sir." He hurried over to pour the drink, his hand shaking. He spilled a few drops on the tablecloth. "Careful, you idiot!" the guest hissed. "Sorry, I'm so sorry," Brandon stammered, backing away. He retreated to the shadows, his heart hammering against his ribs. He wanted to run. He wanted to drop the tray and flee into the rainy night. But he couldn't. He needed this job. He needed the money to pay his rent. The speech ended, and the room erupted in a standing ovation. Emily walked down the steps of the stage, heading straight for table 1. As she sat down, the head of catering signaled Brandon. "Hayes, table 1 needs a refill. Move!" Brandon froze. I can't. Please send someone else. Everyone else is busy," the manager barked. "Go or you're fired without pay." Brandon swallowed the bile rising in his throat. He adjusted his grip on the tray. He kept his head down, staring at the carpet, praying to a god he hadn't spoken to in years that she wouldn't recognize him. He approached the table. He filled Harrison's glass. He filled the glass of the senator next to her. Then he reached Emily. Her hand came into view. She wasn't wearing a ring. Her nails were manicured, perfect. He poured the champagne, the golden liquid bubbling up to the rim. His hand was trembling so badly the bottle clinked against the glass. Clink, clink. Emily didn't pull away. She waited until he was finished. Then she spoke. "Thank you." It was just 2 words, but the tone froze Brandon's blood. It wasn't the voice of an ex-wife. It wasn't the voice of anger. It was the voice of a stranger, polite, distant, indifferent. He couldn't help it. He looked up. Their eyes met. For a second, the sounds of the gala faded away. Brandon looked into the grey eyes he had woken up to for 3 years. He searched for a spark, anger, sadness, love, hate. Anything to prove that he had mattered to her, that he had left a mark. But there was nothing. She looked at him the way one looks at a waiter. She looked at him, and she saw service. She saw a function. She saw nobody. "Is there anything else, ma'am?" Brandon whispered, his voice cracking. A tear escaped his eye, tracking through the sweat on his cheek. Emily paused. She saw the tear. She saw the cheap suit. She saw the ruin of a man who had been consumed by his own vanity. She could have destroyed him right then. She could have announced his name to the table. She could have humiliated him one last time. But Emily Sterling had moved on. She was building an empire, and empires don't concern themselves with rubble. "No," Emily said softly, turning her attention back to the senator beside her. "That will be all." Brandon stood there for a heartbeat longer, a ghost haunting a feast he could never join. Then he turned and walked away. He walked through the kitchen, threw his apron in the laundry bin, and walked out the service door into the alley behind the hotel. The rain was pouring down now, cold and unrelenting. Brandon Hayes walked into the darkness of New York City, the sound of applause for his ex-wife fading behind him, swallowed by the noise of the traffic. He had wanted a life of luxury. He had wanted to be important. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his wallet. It was empty, save for the single $20 bill the manager had shoved at him for his shift. He looked at the money. It was enough for a meal. He walked toward a diner, the neon sign flickering in the rain. He was just a man in a wetsuit, hungry and alone. And back in the warmth of the plaza, under the crystal lights, Emily Sterling raised her glass in a toast to the future. Finally, truly free. And that is the story of Emily Sterling and Brandon Hayes. It's a brutal reminder that when you marry someone, you marry their heart, not their wallet. Brandon chased the illusion of wealth and lost the reality of true value. He learned the hard way that the penniless woman he looked down on was the only person who could have given him the world. What do you think? Did Brandon deserve his fate? Or was Emily too harsh? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single one. If you enjoyed this story of revenge, karma, and justice, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel grow. And don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss another story of scandalous secrets and sweet revenge. Thanks for watching. And remember, be careful who you step on today. They might be the ones signing your paycheck tomorrow.